Hello everybody, Ben Woodruff here with another falconry video. Today's video I'm going to be doing a comparison of two incredible falcons, Prairie Falcons and Lanner Falcons. New World species and an Old World species. But before we jump into these two icons, if you haven't already, if you could please hit subscribe. It really helps me keep this channel up and going. And with that, jumping into these species. Why on earth am I doing these? An Old World and a New World species. Why am I comparing these two specifically? Well, I'm glad you asked, random viewer, because when I read books, or on the internet, but especially books, really good books, I see a lot of falconers, but also a lot of biologists who maybe have a lot of experience with one of these, both in the wild or as a falconer or whatever, as a biologist, field biologist, and they know of the other one on the other side of the world, or vice versa. And they will often be like, oh, the Prairie Falcon and the Lanner Falcon, they fill similar roles. Convergent evolution on the other side of the world, blah, 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 blah. I totally disagree. And they fill some similar roles, but these are far more complex species in their roles and how they came into being. And they're both used in falconry. And so I think it's worth really kind of setting the record straight and really getting into these species. Let's start off with my home territory. I live in Utah, the United States, out in the American West. And here, the area I live is rich in prairie falcons, almost about the heartland of the densest of where you find them. But prairie falcon is a little bit leading. Now, the Latin name Falco mexicanus. If you're, watching this in another country and maybe that term is different, it's not called a prairie falcon. I think it should be called a desert falcon, really. But a prairie is usually considered, a grassy, open place, right? Do they live in prairies? Yes. Do they live in deserts? Yes. Do they sometimes live in mountainous terrain and very high deserts? Yes. This species lives in western Canada, the western and central United States, and Mexico. That's a broad range that they cover. And some of their areas are comparatively lush, being rich with food, a lot of rainfall, and some of them are as absolutely arid as can be. With that, one might expect prairie falcons to have a wide range of color. They don't. They really don't. Not only from region to region do they not vary all that much, but also even from a juvenile to an adult, their colors don't change. But I'm getting a little off track, which is the nature of a man with ADHD. So prairie falcons, let's just get into them first. What on earth are they? What is their size? What do we know of them? Genetic studies have shown that they are a very early offshoot of the peregrine falcon. So early that if you went back in time to that time, if the generations showing up in the mitochondrial DNA are showing that really it would be like a proto-peregrine. You might not even, what it branched off of, you might not even recognize as a peregrine. Now we know peregrines. If you know this channel, I mention peregrine falcons a lot. Ben Woodruff's opinion, the peregrine falcon, the ultimate falcon for falconry in general. I guess it depends on what you're going after. If you're like, I'm going to hunt sparrows, then yeah, go get a kestrel or merlin. But you know what I'm saying. Overall, I think the peregrine is amazing. The peregrine is the most well-ranged falcon. It's adapted to so many environments. It lives in almost every continent and country of the world. And we do see, within that, very great range in size and color with the peregrine falcons. So what's the deal with the prairie? Well, peregrine falcons... Well, let me rephrase that. Where prairie falcons exist, there are also peregrines. Prairie falcons seem to be able to handle things a lot more desolate than a lot of peregrines do. Usually, where I live, if you're going to find peregrines, they're going to be near a water source. And it's maybe not so much that they're drinking it, as that their food is. Prairie falcons will be in the most inhospitable alkali flats where you're like, there's nothing to eat here. Hello, I'm a well-fed prairie falcon and I find plenty to eat here. They're amazing. Prairie falcons are, you can't say they're the same size as peregrines because again, depending on where you are in the world, maybe you're in some part of the world where the peregrines are tiny. But locally, our peregrine falcons that live in Utah and our prairie falcons are similar in size. The anatum peregrine subspecies in the prairie falcon. But so it would definitely be considered a large falcon. One of my friends, Leah, flies a female, and every time I see that falcon, I'm like, now there's a proper falcon, because it's just in every way, a prairie falcon has the build of a quote-unquote proper falcon, like a proper game hawk, right? Big feet, very large, long toes. Like a peregrine. Not as long as a peregrine, but like a peregrine. comparatively long legs for a large falcon. The exact opposite of a gyr. Gyr falcons have stumpy little legs to conserve heat. Prairie falcons, a little bit longer legs, helps dissipate heat, and it's also good for some other things too, where they crash the brush. Their chest is very broad. It's got a lot of muscle. They've got dense muscle, and a lot of it not as dense or as much as a peregrine, but they do have a lot of it. They have a big head, large, powerful beak, classic falcon in every sense of the word. Their wings, like a classic large falcon, are long and are narrow, and very well proportioned falcon. So because they live in a lot of very arid areas, what we see is the chest color is. You remember, when it comes to colors, colors can do different things. Sometimes you want to absorb certain light waves to get certain vitamins or to warm up. Sometimes you want to repel it. White colors reflect and bounce back the spectrum of light. So prairie falcons are usually very white-chested, and in a situation where you're trying to repel summer heat, that can bounce it away. In the winter, it can also look like snow, depending on what you're trying to do to avoid predators such as golden eagles. But their back is usually brown to dusty. And when I say dusty, I mean like a blue-gray brown with sort of a dusty sheen look to it. That blends in very well with the rocks and the plants that they are around. Okay, so this is a very common species within its range. But here's where it gets interesting. And this is an important setup to understand that it is not just filling the same role as a Lanner Falcon. You got to understand this. Most areas of the world, old world, you will have kind of three species. You'll have a big falcon species or something comparable. You'll have a peregrine, of course, the omnipresent peregrine, a saker, and a Lanner. Or a peregrine, a saker, and a lagger falcon. Or a peregrine, a gyr falcon, and a Lanner falcon. You have kind of these three roles. We don't have that here. Here in the western United States and in Mexico, you have a peregrine and a prairie. Okay, so you're missing that role. Our peregrines fill a peregrine role just like the old world peregrines do. But the prairie has got to kind of bump up to fill the saker roles and bump down to fill the Lanner roles. And I'll get to Lanners in a minute. If you know this channel, you know we're going into Lanners because it's Ben Woodruff, the Lanner man. So what are we going after here for prey? Now, they can go after any prey that a peregrine would hunt. Both in falconry and in the wild, they can hunt any prey from as small as a sparrow all the way up to a duck or a pheasant, and they do. In my region, we have a lot of extremely desolate areas where we see the highest density of prairies. Extremely desolate, salt flats, alkali, hardly any sagebrush. And one of their biggest prey items are horned larks and also meadowlarks. They'll hunt anything else they find. But that is a very gamey prey base, meaning a very athletic, like, whoa, that is not easy prey to go after. It helps that they're in such open country, but that's not easy prey. And so that suggests and demonstrates a species that is incredibly athletic and incredibly fit with the ability to just launch like a rocket, like a jet plane, just chase after their prey with such speed. However, unlike a peregrine, they regularly and intentionally also go after rodent prey, mice, rats, pack rats, voles, all kinds of things like that. Lagomorphic prey, jackrabbits, cottontails, things like that. And reptiles, snakes, lizards. A falcon, a proper falcon going after it. I think I'll eat this lizard. That you would be hard-pressed to see a Utah wild peregrine going after those other prey items. But prairies will do it. And they'll just, okay, I'm going to go, there's a mouse. I'm eating a mouse. And then, whoa, now I'm going after a horned lark. It's like, that's really quite the range. And I'll get to how that compares with sakers and lanners here in a minute. But very interesting in that way. And when they hit, if they just go after mammal prey, you might think of them almost as like, okay, pounce. I have seen them hunting on the ground. In fact, I had a long story that I won't do the whole story, but basically I had a trapping situation that resulted in a prairie falcon for about 45 minutes, half an hour, 45 minutes on the ground in this field looking for, because it had made a pass, missed, and then was running around on the ground looking for the prey I'd put out for a trap. And that you don't normally see like a peregrine falcon doing something like that. I'm looking for something to eat on the ground. You don't see that. So you would never see that and then expect prairie falcons to hit as hard as they do. When a prairie falcon stoops, they're just, I contend, even though I like peregrines more as a choice for a falconry bird, I contend that a prairie falcon hits harder. When they hit avian prey out of the sky, it's just not that peregrines don't hit hard. And peregrines are going faster, but however they do it, it seems to me, my ones that I have flown, that a prairie is among the hardest hitting falcons that you'll ever encounter, which is not something you would associate with a bird that is also going after mice and lizards. It's kind of a surprise. Prairie falcons, as far as falconry, I've flown many. I love them. That's my first big falcon I ever flown. I've been so impressed with their abilities. They really are my favorite falcon to hunt partridge with, chucker partridge, out in the high desert. But they are not consistent in the ways that a peregrine is. And somebody else on there who's a prairie lover, share your stories on here and you'll be like, well, hey, here's what you did wrong, Ben, and here's why mine are always consistent. But just they're so brainy that I've had prairies that like, okay, they're going up and they're performing, okay, same height, same dive, same scenario. Next day, same height, same weight, same dive, same scenario. And then the next day they're like, I just kind of want to dink around, nothing different. And you're like, what is the deal? And then the day after that, they're back to normal. The inconsistency and the over-intelligence of prairies where they're just like, sometimes want to self-hunt is why I normally lean more towards peregrines over prairies. Because really, again, a Utah peregrine and a Utah prairie are fairly comparable in size. I've said before, too, in other videos that when you're kind of comparing them, a male prairie, at least locally, if you have just hypothetical sizes here, female peregrine, female prairie, male peregrine, male prairie. It seems like there's a little bit more of a drop in size, and some of those male prairies are focusing even more on faster prey and are even a little bit smaller. But interesting species, very odd species, usually nesting in very open country, often have 5 young, which again, every eyrie I've ever climbed into, I'm always impressed that it's like, I don't see any prey. You got your own mouths to feed, and you had 5? A lot of our local peregrines in the same area will only have 2 or 3 eggs, and prairies routinely have 5, and they all live to their full age and fly off, and it's like, okay, it's impressive. Scrappy birds, proper falcons, but also scrappy mousers. It's amazing. So Lanners, now it's going to the other side of the world. Now remember, I said prairies are, Western Canada, Western United States, and Mexico. Okay, that's prairie falcon. Lanners cover an even more diverse range of habitat. And their range has been reduced somewhat in the north and northwest of their range, but they live in parts of Europe, Western Europe, the Mediterranean, the sub-Saharan Africa, and then all the way down to South Africa, and then you get them over in the Arabic parts of, the Middle East, and sometimes into places like India too. But once you get further east, they start to get replaced by the Lanner falcon, which is a ridiculously closely related species. So, but the Lanners, you're Mediterranean. Oh, I'm living on the coast of an ocean, or I'm in sub-Saharan Africa in the hyper-arid white deserts, or hey, I'm in South Africa among wildebeest and lions and elephants. It's really different when you think Italy versus South Africa, Egypt versus, traditionally they were even in the wild in England back in the day. That's England versus South Africa. That's a wide range. And so, as we would expect, you have a very, very, very wide range in colors. Someday, I'm working on it, but I'm collaborating on a video with several people around the world to make the ultimate Lanner Falcon video going into depth of the different subspecies as well. Because there's no literature. This is about the only book on it right here. It was written by Giovanni Leonardi, the Lanner Falcon. It's really the only book. If you have other books out there on lanners that you know of, tell me, because I will buy it. I love them so much. But nobody really talks about them. And so before going into some of the differences in the subspecies, first and most importantly, the Lanner Falcon is the falcon of ancient Egypt. The falcon represented by the ancient Egyptian god Horus, which is the Greek word for it. The Egyptians pronounced it Hor, H-O-R, but that sounds a little odd on a video if you don't know that. So the god Horus, and there's other falcon deity as well, based off of the Lanner Falcon. There's many falcons in Egypt, and falconers in Egypt fly a number of falcons, but the Lanner Falcon is the falcon. Okay, it's got the very specific markings on the face that are instantly recognizable if you know your falcons. So it has a rich history with humanity, predating falconry in some areas, that just a reverence for the species itself. But the regions you go to, you see a lot of difference, and a lot of difference in what they hunt. Some of the Mediterranean and getting into Europe, some of those lanners, their back is as blue as the bluest peregrine falcon. Like if you saw them from behind and you only saw the back, you'd be like, classic peregrine. And then you turn around like, oh. Their chest is white with black spots all over and a very nice, handsome red cap. Totally different than my second favorite, which I think is the most classic looking, are the South African ones. That they're ones that I typically fly, which they have a dusty back, which is like blue with a dusty sheen, kind of similar to some of the prairies. And the chest is a pinkish sunset color with little to no spots or speckles whatsoever. And to me, that is just living art. That's my second favorite. And again, throughout the range, you get different colors, but in the hyper-arid sub-Saharan desert and the white desert of Egypt, we get my favorite lanner, the Erlangerie subspecies. This is an excruciatingly white lanner, front and back, some paler than others, based off of the conditions where they live. Likely both a dual purpose here is that on the one hand, again, like I said, the whiter you are with feathers, the more you are reflecting and bouncing back heat rather than absorbing it. That's good so you stay cool. And secondly, predatory birds that might come after you, hey, if you blend in with the white desert, you're going to survive. So that's my favorite lanner, is the Erlangerie, and it's from talking to a lot of people overseas who have flown, seems like some of the sub-Saharan ones, when you, kind of in Morocco and the white desert of Egypt, some of the palest lanners are some of the most easygoing, the most likely to be a mouser, or I'm just going to go hunt lizards, and least likely to go after birds. Let me rephrase it. Some of the least gamey of the lanners, when I've talked to people who have flown subspecies overseas, that my favorite lanner is the least gamey, the least spirited of a hunter, it sounds like. But again, that they can afford to do that. There is no waste in nature. So if you say, hey, look, here is a buffet I'm laying out of prey that is available to be hunted with no competition, a species or many species are going to come in and take it. In the New World, the really deserty areas of Canada, Western United States, and Mexico, prairie falcons are like, hey, there's no sakers. I'm going to go after this and after this. But in the old world, in most of these regions, there is a saker or something comparable taking up this. And so some lanners in those areas only go after this. They'll just take care of that. And that is why some lanners are really extremely buoyant. Now, lanners are a classic falcon too. They have long, broad wings, just like a peregrine or a prairie or a saker or a gyr. They did I say broad? Long, narrow wings. Long tail, they have long toes, proper toes, not quite as long as a prairie, and a prairie's not quite as long as a peregrine, but still long, definite bird-catching toes. But they're a bit different. When we compare the prairie and a lanner side by side, South African lanner to a Utah prairie, Let's take a look at both of these. Both front and back, you can see the difference. They both have folded up the classic long primary wings. And a prairie, again, is a near perfect proportioned falcon in the classic sense of the term falcon. But a lanner has got longer primaries. And their secondaries are a bit longer too. More importantly, when you use those primaries and secondaries with the musculature on the front, the chest, the breadth of the chest, the density of the muscle on a lanner is nowhere near as dense or as powerful as a prairie. Now, lanners are very fast, but it's not as much of a mass base. It's not about like the myrtles, where the faster you build up, the faster you're going. And you just let momentum carry you through once you build that speed. Prairies are like that. They're dense enough. But again, lanners, not as dense in the musculature, not as powerfully built in the flight muscles, and longer primaries and slightly longer secondaries by proportion, which makes them much more buoyant. What this means is a lanner has to do a lot less work to stay aloft, and a lot less work to move forward. So that is very beneficial if you're going after nitpicky little prey, if you're going to go after a lizard, if you're going to go on after a spiky-tailed Egyptian Euromastix lizard. It's one of their favorite treats. You're going to go after that, it might just go under a rock. That's very different than, I'm chasing a pigeon. Do lanners hunt pigeons? Yes. But that smaller, rabbits, rodents, reptiles, that prey base factors more prominently into their diet. And so there's a benefit to having longer wings and having less density so that you can and kind of even hover or do a little whoop and get your prey that a prairie would have a little bit harder of a time with. And again, part of why this is driven this way is because sakers in a lot of their range are competing. And so if you're competing with saker for some of the bigger prey and some of the more spirited prey items, makes more sense to go after the smaller stuff. But that being said, they go after some amazing athletic prey. The sand grouse is one of my favorites. I have not had the chance in person to go to Africa to witness this, and I pray that someday I will, because to me, there is nothing that says Lanner Falcon more than the dance of a Lanner Falcon and a sand grouse. There are many species of sand grouse. They come to the watering hole. They're very unique because not only do they drink, but their feathers on their chest have capillary action. So they can kind of, like a sponge, soak up water, fly back to their nest, and their young can basically drink from their feathers in the desert heat. Well, lanners know this, and they all hang around the watering hole waiting for the sand grouse to appear. I mean, again, these are fast, fit, powerful prey species that wild lanners go after. And a lot of wildlife photographers take great shots of these, and again, hopefully I will get the opportunity to see this in person someday. But lanners, again, think of a prairie falcon as a very fit, powerful bird that can go over some of these lazier species. I guess I shouldn't say lazier species, but species that require a less athletic form of hunting to catch. And think of lanners as the opposite. Lanners are flawless at hunting some of these less athletic prey species, and they push up and also do go after, okay? So prairies here going this way, lanners here going this way, if that makes sense. Hard for me to come up with the proper words to really describe it. But it's important to see that difference. But again, as you look at these species side by side, you can see that even though the prairie is a little bigger, it's not just that it's a slightly bigger falcon. It's also just, it's got much longer legs, it's got a much deeper, broader, denser chest and flight muscles, and you can see the lanner, you can see the buoyancy, you can see that the tail is not as long compared to its body, and that the primaries are much longer than on the prairie falcon, which is kind of cool to see side by side and understand how they work. Now, because of this, lanners are usually, and most subspecies are very reliable. Once you dial in the weight management, they're very reliable, and because they're buoyant, they are often used as the ultimate lure training bird, having them dive back and forth over and over again to a lure, even in the heat of the summer. So in my country, it's a species that is often used for demonstrations of falconry. Zoos and aviaries and places like that will often use a Lanner falcon for that purpose, where other falcons, especially in the summer, would have a difficult time or would like, I'll make a few passes and I'm done. Lanners are like, wee, I'm buoyant, I'll dive forever, wee. And they just have a great old time. Where a prairie falcon, being denser, a little closer to a peregrine, is not as prone to just wee. It's like, okay, we're doing this, I'm diving, I have my limit, and then, oh, it's kind of hot, I don't want to just keep diving and diving and diving. So good to see that difference as well. They're both wonderful falconry birds. It has been a real treat online to get to know all of you and to meet people from all over the world who fly Lanners and to kind of share thoughts, share ideas, and share experiences of what prey, what flight styles you do. When my prairies, I usually do, I try to train them like a classic falcon. I try to train them to wait on 800 feet, 1,000 feet. 800 feet's more than enough in my book. I know some people love to sky out their bird, which is also amazing, but if I'm just going after a pheasant or a river duck, then 800 feet's just great. Flush them. That's my goal with the prairie. Lanners, I do train them to wait on, but I'm okay with a 200 or 300 foot pitch, and I'm also will let them chase off the fist, and also just let them wander. To me, a Lanner falcon is a much more versatile falconry bird. And to me, a prairie falcon is a much more classic bird, but can be a bit tricky to dial in. So, hope this covers a lot. I'd like to go in more depth, but again, I want to save a lot of details for my upcoming Lanner Falcon video. Hopefully that will be coming in by summer. Hopefully I can get finish up with a lot of times that video. It requires a lot of translation back and forth between languages. But again, it's been a lot of fun. And again, if you know of any other Lanner Falcon book besides this, please let us know, share it with us, and so we can all get copies and share our passion for this species as well as prairie falcons. Let me know if you have any questions or comments down below. If you haven't already, please hit subscribe. And as always, happy hawking.